All right, while we're waiting for Amy, we can go ahead and get started. We're going to start this off just like we did the last one. We're going to start with fifth place. I'd just like you to run down how you caught your fish this week. Get as specific as you want to with your baits, techniques, any equipment you were using. Scott, go ahead and start us off.
Oh, okay. So this week was a lot different than 2011 for me. I got lucky and found a spot the first day that had some big fish schooling, and I saw them from about 300 yards away, and they were breaking. And I went over there and I threw a swim bait, a couple casts, and I had a couple big fish follow it up to the boat. I didn't catch any, and I thought, well, definitely want to try this out for the tournament. And went there, started there on day one. Well, throughout practice, I looked for brush piles and fished some grass, kind of did everything, ran some shallow bank patterns, and never really could get super dialed in on any particular pattern. So the schooling fish spot, I thought, I could probably, if things go well, I could possibly win the tournament off that one spot because it's a grade of fish. And so day one, I pulled in there and I caught pretty much all my fish on day one on a fish head spin, half-ounce fish head spin, with a Kitech 3.3 Kitech on the back of it, little pearl pro blue color, 8-pound P-line fluorocarbon, and then ran some river stuff that day as well. Ran up the river and started cranking a ledge up there and caught a lot of fish on deep diving crankbaits, Strike King sexy shad crankbaits, and also big worm, big tight lines UV 10-inch worm on a big jig head. Caught a lot of fish up there doing that at 14 something. Then day two, went to the river spot first, which is where I messed up. I went to the river spot first and didn't catch a whole lot. Went back down to the schoolers and then ran around the rest of the day and caught fish on River Sea Rovers and a couple on tight lines UV, little tiny swim bait with a little jig head on it. Day three, the same thing. Went back to the schooling spot, fish head spin, and then I had to started mixing it up a little bit. I think the key the last couple days, those fish were getting conditioned to seeing the same lure over and over again because I couldn't get them to bite when they weren't actually busting on the surface. So I started changing size of swim baits and brands, and I went to a tight lines UV, the little tiny swim bait that they make, and I started swimming that around on a little jig head and caught a few fish. And then day four, same thing, schooling fish, same techniques there, and was having some trouble today getting something going. Had 3 nice fish in the boat. Picked up the old Jacob Wheeler buzz bait at about 12 o'clock or so. Started running some banks and started catching some nice fish doing that. Pretty much finished out my day, buzz bait in the banks.
All right, thank you. Jacob, how'd you catch your fish this week?
It was an interesting week, obviously. Game plan from the beginning was to go and I had some schooling fish. Matt, Ari, and I, we share a lot of our stuff together, and he had a place down towards the park that he had a schooling fish, and I had some fish in Crystal Springs that were schooling, and the plan was to start in one and him starting the other and figure out which one was the deal. And I'm like, man, this is the Forrest Wood Cup. Why am I going to start on 2-pounders, pound and a halfers? I mean, I want to win this thing. So I stopped on a bluegill bed. It just something told me I had to stop on this bluegill bed. So I stop on this bluegill bed because it's perfect, set up in a little turn right next to the main lake. Pull up there, and I look at the point, and some spots start blowing up. Little keeper spot, maybe not even keepers, whatever. So I roll up in this pocket, don't get bit. I'm idling out. Coo. Big largemouth, 3-pounders. Throw in there, 3-pound largemouth. I'm like, all right. So I caught 2 fish. I actually caught 4 keepers out of those schooling fish the first day. I only weighed in one, that 3-pounder, but that was my primary starting spot every morning. The other spot really didn't pan out. So, but that was really the first 2 days I caught them between throwing a Rashi top walker and a vixen, an old school, barely legal vixen. And I would throw basically I would get up there and I'd cast that bait in there and I'd just work it as fast as I possibly could and get those fish to react. And a lot of the spots and largemouth both, I would catch on the back feather. The thing was making sure that you upsize to a number 2 VMC hook was the key in getting those bites because those fish would come up there and they'd grab it. If you had a number 6 or something like that, you'd lose a lot of fish. And I didn't lose that many fish. For sure, I didn't lose that fish at all on that bait. So then they got sort of used to how Scott was talking about how those schooling fish got used to sort of the same thing. That next morning, third morning, Scott's over there, and I'm like, hey, man, let me borrow a hook, let me bum a hook off you to put on my back of the blade on my fish head. And so basically I caught my biggest fish that morning on the blade of the hook because of Scott. So he hooked me up. Anyway, so that was a schooling fish that I was throwing. Basically, not a fish head spin, but it was just basically underspin. It wasn't a fish head spin, and that's what was my primary deal in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, I would go to the bank. I would run the bank. I'd run as much stuff as I possibly could. In the first day, I had one area I got a couple bites of practice. Really had a horrible practice. Didn't really get a whole lot of bites. Didn't really think the bank was the deal. Just felt like, I could run up there. That's what I love to do. So that's what I wanted to do. So I went up there and fished the bank because that's what I know really well. And if I feel like if I get a couple bites in this one area, I had one probably close to 5 pounds bite me in practice. And then I had another wolf pack of 2 to 3 pounds, maybe like 3 to 4 pounders that blew up on some stuff. I just seen them, but it was a big area. It wasn't like, So I go in there about 10 o'clock that morning, catch a 5 pounder on topwater bait. And that was pretty much the big deal right there. That 5 pounder really played a big deal, and started to continue to do that and expand every day. I expanded on areas. Day 2, I found the area, or day 3, I found the area. Day 2, I found the area that I caught him in day 3. And so that was the thing. I knew day 3 when I caught him, I needed to find one more area. If I found the area, after I caught 14 pounds and what I had yesterday, I ran to go find other stuff. And I never did find that next area. If I knew if I could find one more area, I could probably win the event. And I was keying in on a lot of the pockets after day 3, I was keying in a lot of the pockets that had timber in them. Halfway towards the back, the pockets that weren't getting the pressure. It didn't matter at first, but then later on in the tournament, it started to get tougher and tougher to run those short pockets. Everybody's going to run short pockets, okay? That's how it is. A bluegill spawn, they get in little turns. Short pockets, you get 50 boats out here and you got 40 of them running bluegill spawn stuff in the bank, they're going to get a lot of pressure. So what my goal was, after that, I started thinking, okay, what fish aren't getting messed with? And those fish that were further backs and the major creeks that had timber in them, they weren't getting messed with because the guys aren't taking the time to go back in there. And I would catch 1, 2, wherever the timber started because they wouldn't go that far back. But there's only like 3 or 4 of them now. I fished probably 6 of them and only 2 of them had them. So, but it was definitely the key in getting a better quality bite that fish weren't getting pressured.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. Brandon, you want to tell us how you caught your fish this week?
Yeah. I really had a horrible practice. I didn't find anything I thought was spectacular. I mean, I caught some fish in practice, but every area I found seemed just as good as any other area. It wasn't like I found anywhere. Except the creek that Brad was fishing in, I had 3 bites in there in practice. That was the only place I had more than 1 bite. So the first day of the tournament, I decided to go there. I didn't find the same fish he did. I was fishing a flat bank a couple hundred yards before he was fishing, and it was just a big mud flat with some stumps, some scattered brush piles and stuff before the back of the creek. And the first day I pulled up on it and ran down it and made about 3 passes and had almost 14 pounds. And I was I run down with a buzz bait, and the fish were schooling in like 6 inches of water early. It's the thing we do back home a lot in August, September. They get on big mud flats and school up in, inches of water. And that's how I was catching them on a buzz bait early. And then I would turn around and come back down it with a Zoom old monster. And I was dragging past stumps or whatever I could see, dark spots, whatever's on the bank, and fishing it real slow and just kind of dragging along the mud flat, really. I mean, it was painful fishing because a lot of times you weren't targeting anything. You were just dragging a worm along. And so the second day, I went back to the same creek, and I caught a lemon there this time down the same bank, but it was tough to catch it. I caught 5 fish, and a lot of them were small. And just started running around a little bit. I ran up the lake, and I had been getting some bites in practice on a gunfish in the timber pockets, as Jacob said, up the lake. And I was fishing the small indentions going back into the timber pockets with a gunfish. And I did that the second day and caught 2 of my best fish that day doing that, but it was really tough. I just didn't feel like I could go do it again. So the third day, I started in the creek again and only caught 1 this time. And I was panicked a little bit because I'd had a limit leaving there every day. So I caught 1 fish in that creek. I'm not sure the name of it, Blakely, I believe. And caught 1 fish in there this day, and then just started running around with a horny toad in the hydrilla in the pockets on that end. And I had 9 pounds, but I had some big bites and just didn't put them in the boat. And knew there was something to it, but didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I was just pretty much jumping from pocket to pocket that day. And so today I decided I was going to stay on that lower end. I started on some schooling fish and hooked a couple big schooling fish this morning on actually a Seville bongo minnow, I believe. I threw everything in the boat at them for 30 minutes. They schooled constantly for 30 minutes and never hooked one. And I would retie it over and over. And finally, I think that's what it was. It was rusty. It was old. I don't know. And the first one I landed on, I hooked him. And I ended up losing 3 in a row on it, and then caught a 3-pounder, and then I hooked another 3-pounder that went down to the trees and took my bongo minnow. And obviously I only had one. So finally I switched up and found another topwater, a smaller gunfish that I caught a couple on later. But they got really hard to catch, and you'd land on 10 before you actually got one to bite. And so I started running the horny toad pattern after schooling was over. And I figured out today a little bit what the fish were on. They were in more scattered grass, and most of it was around rock because the rock actually made the grass not mat out. I would say 80% of the pockets on the lower end is a mat of grass against the bank. I never got bit out of a mat. It was always when I could find scattered kind of stringy grass with openings in it. And that was pretty much the way it worked. And today I caught a bunch of fish, just never got a big bite.
All right, thank you. Ramey, I believe you mentioned the Zoom Old Monster on stage, but can you give us the full details of your pattern throughout the week as well?
Mine was pretty simple, I guess you'd say. I found one creek that I got 2 or 3 bites a day out of in practice, and that was basically about it. I tried other places, tried the grass and tried the trees, but just couldn't put nothing together, on that area. Buddy of mine that I traveled with, Andy Morgan, told me, he said, you waste your time because if you go there, he said, that just gives them more places to hide. He said, stay out of the grass and the trees. So anyway, and I did. I went to where I felt comfortable, just fish brush piles, anywhere from 10 to 16, 18 foot deep, anywhere in that range right there. I fished some deeper ones in 20, 25, but caught a little fish out of them. Didn't get many bites at all. So I had a couple of let's see, 3 different little arms in a creek that I could go, in the back of and go the last, 8 or 10, 12 foot of water, and they had a little brush and little brush piles in it, and I'd get bit out of those early, and then when the sun got up, I'd move out to the more closer to deeper water brush piles and fish those, and basically everything I caught except for one today was on a Zoom Old Monster worm, plum apple, and blue fleck. I'd use the blue fleck of a morning, and then when the sun come out, I'd put the plum apple on, and I just, my mind just thinks it give it a little more flash and maybe get another bite,
All right, thank you, Ramey. And
excuse me, one more thing.
Oh, I apologize.
The most important thing that I used this week on my boat was the Garmin Panoptics to locate these brush piles when I was fishing. Now, I located them with their down scan, side scan, in practice. But when I went to fish them, it may take me just a second to get the trolling motor turned. I can hold the rod in the hand like you're not fishing, which that's fine. But I didn't have to make more than one cast. If I lined up on it and seen it on the Panoptics, it's a one cast deal.
I want to add that to my little deal. Reminding that
Yes,
I missed
thank you
saying
for-
that.
thank you.
because
It was very important key to me hitting the brush piles and not necessarily getting the bites, but making sure I hit the brush piles where I did get the bites.
what he said on my side too.
I'm done.
I mean, it is true.
Thank you, Ramey. And now, 2015 Forrest Wood Cup champion, Mr. Brad Knight. How'd you catch your fish this week, Brad?
Okay, for practice, started out really early one morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go out and graph for brush piles. I didn't come pre-fish. I know the lake was changing. So started out early and graphed a bunch, and we fished some, did some topwater stuff the first day, and about lunchtime, maybe just a little bit before, ended up running into the back of the creek, just kind of looking to do something a little bit different, just going to check a lot of different things the first day. I mean, everybody knows there's schooling fish and brush pile fish. The grass was new. So, and the bluegill bed pattern, that's the deal everybody looks for. So it's what wins the tournaments here. So back home for us, some of the guys like myself fish like creek run-ins. They go way back in the creeks. You got fresh water running in. You got stained water. Most importantly, you got unpressured fish that haven't been fished for because everybody's out doing the summer deal for so long. So it's probably been April or May, maybe before these fish have been casted to. So they were really fresh, it seemed. But even when I went in there and I'm running, I run to the back of this creek, and there's actually had been a tornado that had deposited a lot of trees into this mud flat, basically, that was anywhere from 2.5 to 5 feet on top with a ditch running through it. So as I kind of idle back through all the laydowns and stuff, I pulled over on just the most obvious looking tree, and I catch like a non-keeper on the front side of it, and then on the root ball, I catch like a 2.5 pounder. And then I go on, just idle all the way back just to see how far I can go in there, and cranked a homemade crankbait and caught a couple of keepers and left. And I really didn't think that much of it. It wasn't special. It wasn't, tons of 4-pounders breaking like you think you'd have to see to win a tournament like this. It was really, I wasn't real impressed with it. It was just, it looked good. So I went out and did a lot of other things. I really thought I was going to have to fish the grass. I thought that was going to be a big player here, especially once I started seeing it. I thought a frog could be a big player here, as well as a big sinker punching the mats. And that's the way I like to fish. I really tried to play that in, and I couldn't really get the grass deal going at all. So I did the brush pile thing, and I could catch them on about every place that I saw, but they were just all little, and I just couldn't get any consistency going with that. So I started back to running more of the creek places, looking for that dirty water, and there was just a handful of places that had it on the whole entire lake, and I could catch them in it, but I never could get a keeper. The last day of practice, I ran as far up the river as you can go, and probably caught 30 or 40 fish and never caught a keeper. So, and just in all honesty, my second and third day of practice, I never had a keeper bite. So first day of the tournament, I just went to where it was the only place I had the confidence I could catch one. And I ran to the back of, I think Blakely Creek was the name of it, and run back there. Mark Daniels was there. Just first thing, I ran all the way to the back and just started kind of fishing some of those logs. And really, it was just figuring it out as I went. I ended up catching some on a drop shot, just pitching it around some of those logs and lay down deals, and had a limit by like 11 o'clock probably that was, 11 or 12 pounds, which for my practice I thought wasn't going, doing too bad. So I left out of there. And I kind of tapped into, I think, the deal that Brandon was on, because he was also in the area. And I had went past, and mud banks is a big deal for us back home as well. Just the ugly places, they don't stick out, nobody fishes them. But I got on a buzzbait deal and pretty much culled everything that I had that first day with a buzzbait on out on the main part of the creek, on the main creek channel flat. So that actually had me more excited about the back of the creek deal with the logs. I thought the buzzbait was something that could produce the bites to win that tournament if I just left it in my hand and covered enough water, which is, perfect for my style of fishing. Put the trolling motor on 70, make 10 million casts at the end of the day, and hopefully get 5 good bites. But so the second day, I roll back there and start again. I get a pretty good start. Had a limit in the first hour. Caught a couple of really big ones early, and went out with the buzzbait later on in the afternoon and just culled one time, and really spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff, and it never really did pan out very well. So the third day, I tried to I go back in again to the back of the creek around the logs, and by this time I'm figuring out things a little bit more on what was happening. But you could visibly see a log projecting out of the water, and it would just be what I call like pole timber. It would just be like a telephone pole look. Well, Mark was fishing that stuff too, but everybody would fish the stuff that you could see. And what I figured out was you had 2 parts to a tree on some of that stuff. You would either have the part where the branches are, or like the fluffy part we call it, or you'd have a root wad. And that would project long ways underneath the water. You may actually be 30 or 40 feet from where you could see the log sticking out of the water. And what I would do is as I'm back there all day, I'm learning these, the right trees, and I'll get on with my trolling motor, and I'm watching my graph where the tree is to where I can find out where the root wad was or something like that. And I'd mark a waypoint. And that way I could keep coming back through these areas that, Mark and I are casting the exact same places. But that was my advantage over his deal, is I was knowing where those bass were sitting over where you could see. And we caught some off the stuff that you could see, but that was really the main thing. And the water also was falling every day, so it was exposing a lot of new wood for me as well, that I could, as I would be fishing an obvious place that you could see, I would see a dark spot over here, a log deal, that I would go over to and mark, and that way I could come back down and fish it as well. After I had a limit early yesterday that was, decent, I tried to do a lot of different things to kind of make some adjustments. Seems like kind of changed each day on which logs would be the ones. But I had about 8 or 10 that were like, that were pretty prime time that I would catch good ones on. And so we just rolled back and forth. And I culled my last cast yesterday. It started pouring the rain, and my last cast I caught my second biggest one. So I go in there today, expecting to catch them pretty good. Limit early. That's the way it'd been. The first hour was I always could catch them because I knew the right places where they were setting up, and every day, we had a lot of spectator traffic and a lot of camera boats and stuff, and a lot of meandering around through there. It would when you get there first thing, none of that was happening. So those fish were fresh and they were set up right, and you could catch them on the drop shot. And that didn't happen this morning. I made some adjustments to. I saw there was one tree that I started on every morning, and I always caught a keeper or two on. So I rolled straight to that tree and pitched to the outside and all the way around it, and I never got a bite. And that I could feel the pressure on the third day really had affected that area, and they just weren't biting as well. And I looked over and I saw one big, thick, lay down part of a tree that was out in the middle, and I got a flipping stick out, and I hadn't used a flipping rod since I've been here, and the wood, just the grass. And I go over to it, and I put a beaver on, and I pitch right in the middle of that tree, and I think my second pitch, I caught one of my good ones today. Kind of got me off to a little bit of a roll. And fished all the way to the back and coming back out. I caught second and third one on a drop shot, and ended up finishing my limit out in the middle of the day with the drop shot. But the key for me this week is I made another deal with adjustment with the wind started really blowing, changed directions, blowing into the creek, and it hadn't been doing that any throughout the practice. So it really started dirtying the water up, and those fish got really shallow and got active. And I got a square-billed homemade crankbait, a deal that we make back home in East Tennessee. And just kind of went to work shallow, like my third cast. I told my cameraman, I said, all week I've been wanting to catch them cranking a square bill on this wood because that's a big thing for us. And I never could get it going. And today it finally started with that wind change. I put it in my hand. I caught one on a plug that I hadn't caught one on in 5 years. It was really crazy. It was the right situation for it. It's a shallow running deal. And like my first little tree that sticks off the bank, I ended up catching a really good one on and culled 2 or 3 more times. And that was probably the major adjustment for me. It was, like I said, each day was something different. You had to kind of feel out for what you had to do to get the bite. But the drop shot was the most consistent deal for me. Buzz bait was a big player the first day to have the big bag, and then the homemade today, another big deal for me.
All right, thank you. With that, we're already running a little long, so we're going to try to speed this up just a little bit, but I'll open the floor up to specific questions right now. Please direct them at an angler. Don't just ask a question specifically. So, Brian, go ahead.
What's it feel like to culminate a year, a good year, and, all of your goals and, preparation, everything all come together and finish it off on a high note like this?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, it hasn't sank in yet. I don't even, know what to say. I mean, here's the thing that's humbling to me, to put my name on a list that's got, names like Scott Martin and Jacob Wheeler, David Dudley, world champions in bass fishing. And I'm just, I'm truly honored to have my name among that list as well. No matter what happens from here on out, I may never catch another bass again as long as I live, but I'll still be the champ.
You're in the club.
I'm in the club.
You're part of the club.
And you know what? Nobody can take that away from me. So, I've said it a bunch of times to people before. When you win a tour level tournament, that's a career changer. That's a great feather in your cap. But when you win the cup, that's a life changing event. I've said it on stage. I've got a 3-year-old little girl that I can send to college now. I know I can pay for it. I can go write a check and pay my house off when I get home. That's the thoughts that run through my head when I laid my head down at night on my pillow. That, stuff I could provide for my family. This is how I feed them. My wife, quit her job as a nurse 2 years ago, after I had the worst year I've ever had on tour. We just had our little girl, and I'd be gone on a road trip for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'd come home and she'd look at me like she didn't know me, and it was just a snowball effect. It had a terrible year. So I got home at the end of that season, and I said, you're either going to quit the nursing job and go with me on the road, and we're going to do it full time, or I'm going to bow out of the tour and just fish around the house, because it wasn't fair to anybody. And we took that gamble, and we rolled the dice. I had a decent year last year, just capped up a pretty good year this year with this deal. So, we'll go from not having it's how we put groceries on the table. I don't even know what to say. It's just humbling experience.
What was the drop shot you were using?
It was a 6-inch straight tail worm.
Any particular time, brand? What about the buzz bait? Were you using a trailer on it?
I just had a trailer hook.
Who made the balsa wood bait?
That would be me and Craig Powers.
You gonna bring it out virtually?
No. I've sanded on them more. I've never sanded another balsa plug again. I've done. No. That deal's done. I'm never painting another plug again as long as I live either, by the way. The painting business, I've retired. Yeah, no, I'm good. How old? Probably about 10 years old, something like that.
Any more questions for our top 5?
It seemed like the fish are fairly thin. Is that something this time of the year or this late?
I think it's the time of the year.
I think it's shallow fish too. I think
Yeah.
you'll notice the majority. So you look at Ramey, he had freaking fat suckers. They're eating the brush pile, just gobbling up the minnows and stuff. My fish are over there running down the bank trying to catch a little bluegill.
Yeah, they got to swim a lot further to get a bite.
They do. They do. That's the big thing.
Brad, was it more, I guess, I don't know, stressful is the word, but your senses heightened more because Mark was in the area and, you know, you were worried about, running out of fish? Or?
You know, it was just a day at a time. I really didn't worry too much about him because, I don't know how to say this right, but I was catching fish right behind him. I mean, he would fish a place, leave it, and go like 20 yards, and I'd pull right behind him and catch him, like a lot. But the deal was a lot too was I understood how that stuff laid out. With he was casting stuff he could see, and I knew where the stuff was under the water where those bites were coming. Exactly.
All right, we've got time for one more question. We asked this to the last group as well, but other than, following Brad and fishing his areas, is there anything that you would do differently at all this week if you could rewind and start it all over? Brandon, we'll just start with you and move down the line.
Really, this week, I just needed to execute much better. My first 3 fish this morning are all still swimming in Lake Ouachita, which is not what you need to do. And yesterday was horrible. The first 2 days, I never missed a fish or lost a fish. And the last 2 days, I lost as many as I caught, it seemed like. So that was really it. It was just execution. But really, I was just running around, so I can't really say I would have changed anything because I was fishing the way I wanted to, just running around, fishing fast, and covering water.
Jacob, anything you would do differently?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's execution, same thing. I mean, day 2 was a big thing for me. It was my smallest bag till this point, and I was had some really key bites. Lost a 4-pounder schooling. Lost a couple 3.5s, and I felt like I could have a bigger bag than I had the first day, and so that was definitely. But other than that, no. I mean, I fished how I love the fish. I started with schooling fish, went to shallow fish, and just I had fun. I mean, I had fun all week. I mean, I have no regrets. And today I didn't have the bites. I lost 1 or 2 fish, but it wouldn't have mattered. I mean, I might have had 9 pounds or something, but it wouldn't have mattered if I would have won or not. So, I mean, I have no regrets. I went out there and fished my heart out, and that's all it was.
Brad, you don't get to answer this question. I'm sorry. So,
There you go.
Scott, any?
Have a perfect tournament, get all your bites in as well. But, man, I lost a good one yesterday, like a 4-pounder. I thought was really going to come back to haunt me. But that's the most mind-boggling thing to me. I think everything has to go perfect. You got to have a magical week, magical practice. Dude, I had no idea each day what was going to happen. If I was even going to get a bite the next day, it was crazy.
Scott, anything you would do differently this week?
2 things. One is on day 2. I decided to go to my river spot first, thinking, and it was just a bad call on my part, that I could go up there and get 12 pounds and then come back down and save my schooling fish. But probably should have just went with my schooling fish because every day I caught a 3.5 to 4, a 4 and a 3 to 3.5 every single day of the tournament. I fished that spot, so there was really good quality there. I just didn't maximize my time well. And then yesterday, had quite a few missed opportunities that cost me quite a bit of weight. I only had 3 fish, so anytime you don't come with a limit,
Sure.
we all lose fish, but when you don't come with a limit, kind of stinks.
Ramey, would you do anything differently this week if you could do it all again?
No, not necessarily. The only thing that got me was just the weather in general. I mean, I stuck with my plan and what I was going to do and where I was going to do it at. And for 4 days, I beat it out. 2 good days and then 2 cloudy days, but as far as changing anything, no, I wouldn't have.
Well, thank you guys very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to grab these guys outside. Kim let me know that we've got some food for you guys. Dressing room 4, first one on the right, so feel free to go on in. Thanks, everybody, for a great week. We will start with Mr. Baumgartner. I just want you guys to say how you caught your fish this week. Get specific as you want to with your baits, technique, any gear you're using. Go ahead, Chris.
I caught my fish first 3 days. I'd run in the banks early with a buzz bait, with a horny toad, zoom horny toad. And then I'd run up in the back of a river, throwing a chatterbait and a spinnerbait. And today, I didn't think we could win back there, or I could win back there. So I stayed on the lower end of the lake, around the grass, and run the banks with the horny toad. And just fished for the big bite. I got several bites, and I just didn't put them in the boat.
Okay. Mark, how'd you catch your fish this week?
Caught my fish predominantly drop shotting, and I think the key for me was the line that I was using. A lot of people came through the area flipping heavier line. I was using 6-pound Seaguar Tatsu, and I think the lighter line allowed me to get more bites throughout the week as different boats trickled through the area, and I think that was really key. I was using a Aaron's Morning Dawn in color Robo Worm 6-inch straight tail, and I was throwing a Kistler Helium 3 medium light, and using 15-pound Seaguar Smackdown braid as my main line, and just the extra sensitivity to be able to feel those bites, and in the top shot, of course, with the Tatsu being extremely sensitive and abrasion resistant, I was able to pull them off the twigs and the brush that was there on 6-pound tests, and that was really the key for me. And then lastly, I did get into a couple schooling bass, and I was throwing a Vixen on those, and I'm not sure the color. And that was it. That's the only 2 baits I threw all week.
All right, thank you. Zach, where are we catching your fish on this week?
For me, basically, I had 2 areas that I was fishing. They're real similar, shallow wood, back into rivers. I was throwing a toad most of the time, and then after about 9 or 10 o'clock, I would switch over to a buzz bait, a little sand-tone 1/4-ounce buzz bait. I threw it around about everything I could get it to. I caught a ton of fish. I just, I lacked those quality bites, but I caught a ton. I couldn't be happier with what I've done. I went back today. I didn't think I could win out of it, but I know the quality fish that live there, so I just went back and did the best that I could.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nixon, how did you catch your fish this week?
First 2 days, I caught everything I caught, I guess, flipping and on a little grass tip, casting a shaky head with a red bug trick worm and a Yamamoto Slim Pro Cinco. And I was flipping a flapping hog and a biffle bug with about a 3/4-ounce sinker because the fish wouldn't bite, and I was having to make them react. I was snatching it up out of the grass, and about 90% of them I saw the bass grab it. They wouldn't hit it going in. If you didn't rip it by them, they wouldn't bite it. And then that just went away. And yesterday, I started out on the grass tip early, and I guess that storm had them all wadded up there. So I caught 3 big ones early and about 12 foot of water on a worm. And I was throwing 10-pound Tatsu with the 20-pound Seaguar Smackdown braid. And then today I go out there and I can't get a bite doing nothing. And at 12 o'clock I had one little old Kentucky I'd caught on shaky head, and I just abandoned that ship and went off up the lake a ways where I had 2 big fish in practice blow up on a topwater plug, and just put the trolling motor down and acted like I was Brian Thrift and caught me 3, and 2 of them were monsters. So, I could say I wished I'd have done it different and went up there a little earlier. But let me tell you something, I went up there the first day and fished till noon, and I didn't have a bass. So it was just a crazy week. I caught them all after 12 the first day. I caught them all before 10:30 the second day. Yesterday I had them all at 8:30 in the morning, and today at 12 o'clock I'm sucking air, and then I go catch 3 big ones. So it was just, I don't know, all I can say is I was meant to finish 6th, I guess, or 7th.
And Brian, the real Brian Thrift, what were you actually doing this week?
Well, actually, Larry, he went fish, caught him on the bank. I had to slow down and drag a worm today to get him. So I had a limit place. I was getting a lot of bites. catching them. The first 2 days, I probably caught 40 both days on a DC 300 Demiki crankbait, throwing it on 12-pound P-line fluorocarbon. And then after I'd get my limit, I'd go fish shallow. I'd put the trolling motor on 80%, throw a Demiki Rambler, throw a little buzz bait or some other topwater baits, and just try to cover water to get big bites. And the only day I got big bites was the third day of the tournament. And for some reason, I don't know why the fish bit so good the third day, but today I had my limit by 11 o'clock, and they wouldn't bite my crankbait. The third and fourth day, got 0 bites on the crankbait. Had to drag a worm. I caught them on a Demiki Sneak, and just on a 1/4 ounce Texas rig, throwing 15-pound P-line fluorocarbon and a 7-foot medium heavy Fitzgerald Stunner rod. And as far as topwater rods, I was using actually Fitzgerald's got a signature series for me out now. It was my 7.2 frog rod. I was throwing a buzz bait and a frog and stuff like that on it all week. But I've had a lot of fun. I don't know how many fish everybody caught in this tournament, but I feel like I caught the most. It's just a fun event, and I was glad to be back in the top 10 and end the year with a little money in my pocket.
All right, so now that we've heard their baits and techniques, I'll open the floor up to questions. Anyone?
Mark, what was the deal with you in the winter, Brad? Y'all work in the same water?
Yeah, we had been, me and Brad been fishing in the same area every single day, and today was no different. We were in the same area. I actually backed off of what we call the juice, which is basically the better of the sweet spot on the spot. I knew he wanted to start there, and I gave him first crack at that for the morning. I stayed kind of out on the outskirts and fished around, and then moved in later in the day. He had already caught a couple of good ones, and I could hear him back there screaming. So I figured it might be all right if I rode through there to try to catch me a couple, but obviously I was too late.
Way to go, dude. That's good of you.
Coming in, obviously, with how Scott won this in 2011, did you guys think that brush piles would play a lot more than they did? It seemed like there was only 2 or 3 guys who really relied on those primarily, and the rest of it was kind of a topwater deal. Was that kind of something that you figured out as the tournament went on that wasn't the juice?
I think when I got here, it seemed like the lake's in a fall pattern instead of a summer pattern. The fish are acting more like it's the end of September than the end of August. I mean, it's like they've already started their transitions to the back of the creeks and shallow. For me, the main lake bite was dead. I mean, everything I caught was back in the creek.
How did the cold front affect your fish?
Somebody else want to get this?
I think it fired my fish up. I mean, I was fishing shallow in the creeks, like Brian said, and I was praying for cloud cover, rain, and cooler weather. The water temperature dropped almost 10 degrees where I was at, so I think that definitely fired them up. I know this morning it was fast and furious for a little bit, and slowed down, and
I liked it better when it was sunny and we was fishing the same river.
Get us all confused.
Mr. Mark, a lot of people read our newspaper would like to know what the negotiations are like between you and another angler and seeding, figuring out who gets to fish what and when.
Well, for me and Brad, we didn't have any negotiations. It was just a mutual respect amongst each other. We just kind of meandered through this really big area all day long. Not necessarily today, but the days leading up to the day. So I would pass him, he would pass me. We would be talking, laughing, cracking jokes. I mean, we were just having a really good time and catching some fish. And there was really no set negotiation. It was just mutual respect. Like, I see him fishing that twig. Obviously, I'm not going to go over there and jump on the one right in front of him. I'm going to cross to the other side. And we zigzag through each other all week long.
It's been an issue in the sport that kind of brought to the front this year, maybe, just issues between anglers, spectators and anglers.
Yeah.
It seems a little refreshing that we had in a huge event like this, 2 guys share, an area and produce a winning?
Oh, absolutely. As long as you don't get someone that's egotistical and feels like that's their spot, they own this, that, and the third, you won't have those sorts of issues. Brad was really cool. He was a gentleman about it. I knew he had a shot at winning it. I'm happy that he did. And, and once again, I was able to lay off of what I thought was the hot spot and let him have first crack at it. And it worked out great for him, and it worked out great for me, too. I made the top 10, so I'm really happy with that.
Did anyone else come in that area?
Brandon Cobb. So there was actually technically 3 of us. Brandon Cobb fished the area every day as well. And we crossed paths this morning, and I spoke with Brandon briefly. And then he ended up leaving and running some other stuff, and I stayed. But the 3 of us fished this area every single day of the tournament.
Why do you think there was so many fish?
They had bait. Well, I'm not going to say they had bait. The bait was really thick back there. A lot of threadfin shad, and obviously this lake is just infamous for bluegill running all over the place. But it was a threadfin shad deal back there. They had them balled up, and you would see them busting bait like crazy. Then the sun would pop out, and then they would start setting up on those stumps and sticks and laydowns, and then we could just pick them off with a little drop shot or a flip bait or something like that.
So it wasn't necessarily brush piles, but there was obviously.
You know what's funny is I think they are some of them were man-made. You could kind of tell that someone drug like a tree off and set it right strategically because it's like right where the creek channel meets the point. You know what I mean? Right. So it was some of that, and then some of it was. Yeah, and then some of it was natural from, the winter with the heavy rains and what have you, so.
All right, we've got time for one more question. This is going to be posed to all the anglers. If there's anything that you would do differently throughout the week, other than, following Brad and fishing right behind him, is there anything that you would change from what you did throughout this week? Larry, we'll start with you.
No, there's nothing I'd change. Hindsight, yeah. Yesterday about 8:30, I'd have went through topwater all day long. But, I tried different things. I went back and flipped a while. I went in topwatered a while. I just didn't go back up the lake to a little key area where I caught the big ones today. And, but that's fishing. You have to figure out what you want to do each day. And you got to fish the conditions. And yesterday, I think I really can't even remember what the weather was yesterday. I'm so brain dead. Really, seemed to me like it was raining.
Anything
and
different
all
from you,
kinds
Mark?
of stuff.
I'm gonna piggyback.
And
I'm gonna piggyback on Larry. I wouldn't change anything. And practice was so rough for me. Honestly, I didn't think I could catch a fish. And once again, like I said on stage, the last 2 hours I found that spot, and that's why I never left because that was all I had. And so I wouldn't change a single thing.
All right. Brian, anything you would change?
Maybe the location of the event. That's about all I can think of. Put it on Lake Norman. Be good.
no, home field advantage. That's no good. That don't work.
Chris?
No, I don't think I'd change. In hindsight today, I didn't. I probably could have went to my area. I've been fished the first 3 days and caught. I'm sure I could have caught more than what I caught today. But like I say, I had the bites, and if I'd have get these fish in because they were big fish, I'd have been right there. So I can't complain. I didn't execute.
Zach, anything you would do differently?
No, I wouldn't change anything either. I had an awesome pre-practice, which normally is not good for me. I normally have a terrible practice and an awesome tournament. So I was pretty pumped up for this. I kind of kept quiet about it. But, I wouldn't change anything that I did. I had a game plan for sun. I had a game plan for clouds. And like I said, I did the best that I could. I lost a couple key fish that probably would have bumped me up a little further. But all you can do is come out and try to fish as clean as you can, and that's what I did, and I ended up where I'm at.